Seven on Sundays podcast is intended for mature audiences. Episodes discuss sensitive and fraught topics that many teens and 20-somethings face, but may be triggering. The content may not be suitable for all audience members. Please take caution when listening.
Hearing that if you're watching porn while masturbating is a sin sort of sealed the deal for me. And I remember thinking, well, this is it. I'm the ultimate sinner. I'm awful. I'm horrible. This is shameful what I'm doing, but it feels so good. So how can it be so shameful? Porn told me that I was overweight. Porn told me that because I didn't look like the people on the screen, that I wasn't worthy. Porn told me that I need to be able to have sex like the girls on the screen. Porn told me that I need to be good at sex. Porn told me not only do I need to be good at sex, but I need to perform well in order to please my partner, and that it's on me and that's my job. If I found out my partner was looking at certain porn stars who didn't look like me, it would send me into a spiral and force me to go into panic mode.
Hello and welcome to our show today. I am Stephanie Boye, sex educator and one of your hosts, and I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Chez Leeby. Today we are talking to Parker, and I love this conversation. I'm not going to give it too much of an intro, just to say Parker might be one of the most articulate and self-reflective people that we have interviewed in a little while. I shouldn't say that. All of our guests are amazing, but very excited to talk to Parker and for you to hear the show. So welcome to the show, Parker. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor that I get to share in such a safe space. I'm just really grateful and really excited. So I'll just dive right into the story. So I started watching pornography when I was around 13. I want to say between 13 and 14. I grew up in a very conservative household, so I wasn't exposed to graphic movies, graphic books, graphic images on the computer. I was very sheltered from a lot of media. And we watched a movie that I can strongly recall the name of. It's a musical, and it's called Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. It's a musical about the Bible story. And in the Bible story, as if you know, there's this a part of the story where there's a woman who seduces the main character and she's married. Well, in the musical, they have this fun, it's supposed to be this fun, kind of sexy scene and song where they describe what happens. And I just remember so vividly that movie, and particularly that scene, just starting this on switch for me of feelings that I had never felt before. So I can't remember how it scaled from watching that movie to finding myself on YouTube and finding scenes of people kissing or people cuddling or people making out, just starting extremely tame, if you would, with watching. But I just started to get super involved in watching things on YouTube. And this was back when it was very easy to access the beginnings of porn movies, I would say. And they would obviously leave out the explicit content, but you could easily watch up until a certain point, and then there would be a link where you could click on and see the full video. I found myself watching a lot of these videos, particularly lesbian scenes, which was very interesting because having grown up in a conservative Christian household, not only was watching porn banned, but especially watching homosexual porn, girl on girl, guy on guy, was very just completely banned. Like, that was not, my family was not supportive of homosexuality and was not open to, they believed it was a sin. And that's what I was raised to believe. So starting right off the bat, me not only watching porn and disobeying my parents, but watching lesbian porn, I felt like a double whammy of just the ultimate sin. I would explore and I would click on the links in the descriptions of the videos to find the full video. And I found myself really disgusted at the full graphic content of the video. I found that I really liked the romantic sweet, kissing, touching, very feel good beginning parts of pornography. And I found that I was really disgusted with the explicit content of actual full on porn and sex. So I can remember very explicitly the first day that I orgasmed, and it was a very weird experience for sure. I remember I was home alone. I wasn't watching porn actually. So I decided I was really bored and I decided I had this little digital camera and I was like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna I was really into videography when I was younger, making YouTube videos and just goofing around. So I was like, okay, I'm just gonna film myself just dancing around. I don't know. It was a weird home alone, being bored, being homeschooled thing to do. So I remember the song E.T. by Katy Perry was playing, and I was just dancing on camera just for fun. After dancing, I was stretching and I was in I want to say a cobra position. And I just remember it feeling really good. And I remember just starting, just my body just was telling me to dance. And so I was just moving my hips and dancing. And then all of a sudden, there was this explosion of this feeling that I had never ever felt before. And it was this wonderful, beautiful, extremely good feeling. And I remember thinking, I want to feel that all the time, anytime I can. And I don't know what that was, but I want to feel that again. So I the only way that I thought that I could replicate that feeling was in that position. So it made it very hard for me to find a time when not only my family was gone, but I could be laying on my stomach in this cobra position, moving my hips to try to get that feeling again. It was going to be very hard to do that without prying eyes of my family. So I found it very hard to be able to orgasm again and again. And the correlation between porn and the fact that I had orgasmed was not they weren't tied together. I didn't know what an orgasm was. I didn't know that that's what happened during sex because I only watched the beginnings of porn. I assumed and was taught that, you kiss someone and you lay in a bed and that's how babies are made. I wasn't taught the full extent of what happens. And so the correlation between this good feeling that I wanted to replicate and porn didn't coincide, which I find very interesting now thinking about it and thinking back on it, how they didn't relate at all. Yeah, so I continued watching lesbian porn. Eventually, at some point, I think I had Googled, what I had heard the word orgasm, I had Googled what it was, and I had a suspicion that, oh, maybe that amazing feeling that I felt, maybe that's what an orgasm was. And I remember Googling and finding the word masturbate and realizing, oh, this is a thing. And I essentially taught myself and learned myself through online and through watching more videos. I do remember at one point sitting in an In-N-Out drive-through when I was about 15, and I admitted to my mom because we were pretty open and honest with each other, and I remember just feeling like I had to get this off my chest because at this point, for 2 years, I had been watching porn consistently, all the while feeling extremely guilty, feeling extremely shameful, and just feeling like I was doing every wrong sin in the book, and I wanted to talk to my mom about it because I felt like she should know and she should have she should be able to give me advice. So I remember asking her in the parking lot and I said, "Look, I think I might be addicted to porn. I watch it a lot." And I asked if it was a sin to masturbate. And I don't fully remember what she said, but I do remember the words of her saying, "Well, it's a sin if you're watching porn while you do it. But if you just do it, I don't think that's a sin." She was very flustered. I think I caught her off guard. I love my mom to death, but I know that that really had been probably a very difficult question for her to receive from her daughter. I wouldn't have known how to handle that myself. But hearing that if you're watching porn while masturbating is a sin, sort of sealed the deal for me and thought. And I remember thinking, well, this is it. I'm the ultimate sinner. I'm awful, I'm horrible, this is shameful what I'm doing. but it feels so good. So how can it be so shameful? You know, being extremely back and forth with my feelings.
Parker, thank you so much for sharing this. This is really real. And I love how honest you are. And I just want to say I'm super appreciative of that. My wondering as you're telling all this, so if it had gone on for 2 years, how old were you when you talked to your mom? Were you like 15, do you think?
I think I was about 15. Yes.
Okay. Okay. We don't maybe want to get into this yet, but did she in any way explore or validate your feelings, like your confusion and your shame and your worry? Could she go there at all, or did you just drop it and then eat your burgers?
I honestly remember sort of dropping it and eating her burgers.
Okay.
I remember telling it to her very matter of fact and not admitting to the fact that I felt shame and not admitting to the fact that I felt like I was sinning. I just remember just wanting to ask her factually.
Okay.
And I did learn much later down the road as an adult when I had asked her about that conversation. She had mentioned something I didn't know at the time, which was that on that same day, apparently, my youngest sister had told my mom she wanted to run away, and my middle sister had told her that she wanted to die. And then I had told her that I was addicted to pornography. And so
Whoa.
hearing that we have there's 3 girls in our family, and hearing that she had to get all 3 of those extremely hard questions from her daughters and basically the same day helped
Whoa.
me understand how she might have had a clueless reaction because I think that was just the icing on the cake of, "Oh my god, what am I doing as a parent?"
Oh my
But it was
god.
interesting talking to her after that and
Poor
hearing that it was either the same day or within the same week, but all 3 of us had been going through something really drastic.
poor mom.
I
Poor
know.
mom. Yeah.
So it really just helps me all the more appreciate everything she's done because, again, I would not be able
Yeah.
to. It's a lot.
Okay, are you ready to go back to your story?
Yes. I do want to add on the fact that while I felt like I was sinning and felt extremely guilty, deep in my mind, I had this feeling that, well, at least I'm not sinning fully. And I'll elaborate on what I thought that meant. I was raised to believe that premarital sex was not only wrong and not only a sin, but basically it was the worst thing you could do to yourself. It would destroy everything. It would destroy your relationship with God. It would destroy the sanctity of marriage. It would destroy, it was just bad all around. And so, in my mind, while I was sinning and feeling bad about watching porn, at least I wasn't having premarital sex. Because again, in my mind, that was the absolute worst thing that could ever happen. But at this point, I had started thinking a lot more about sex. I started watching a lot more porn. The graphic parts about porn didn't disgust me as much. I started watching full porn scenes with lesbians. I started exploring male and female and figuring out what sex looked like to me, which was, the full graphic, 43-minute porn scenes. And I started diving really deep into that to the point where it was almost, I want to say almost every night that I was on my iPod or I didn't have an iPhone yet, but whatever ways I could find to just explore and be curious about this thing and masturbate and how it made me feel. I just became obsessed with feeling that way and whatever I would have to do to feel that orgasm and feel it again, it I would do. I started developing a crush on a boy in our homeschool, which ended up lasting for about 6 years, and it was a very, very deep crush. I would imagine all sorts of naughty things with him. I would write stories about him. I would write letters about him. My best friend at the time, we grew up together. We were very close. She had a crush on the same person. Sometimes we would even, be talking in her car late at night and fantasizing about what sex would be like with him, like experiencing that sort of dare I say, like horniness with a friend for the same person was a very interesting experience that, I never really saw myself doing. But this was all, again, this fantasy. I had never kissed a boy before. I had never had sex with anyone before. So continuing with the porn addiction, I realize now that porn created extreme self-esteem issues for me. I believed throughout, you know, ever since age 13 and on, I believed that I was overweight. Porn told me that I was overweight. Porn told me that because I didn't look like the people on the screen, that I wasn't worthy. Porn told me that I need to be able to have sex like the girls on the screen. Porn told me that I need to be good at sex. Porn told me not only do I need to be good at sex, but I need to perform well in order to please my partner, and that it's on me and that's my job. Porn later down the line became an issue in a lot of my relationships because if I found out my partner was looking at certain porn stars who didn't look like me, it would send me into a spiral and force me to go into panic mode and try to figure out ways that I could look like that porn star so that I could be liked more by that relationship. So, realizing and recognizing now the weight of what porn did to me, which at the time I couldn't see it, but now I feel like I'm living in the consequences of what watching porn created for me. I still have extreme confidence issues. I still have extreme self esteem issues. And I do want to preface as well that I think I said it earlier, but sex was never talked about in my household. My parents never taught me about protection. They never taught me about the actual act of sex. They never taught me what to do if I was assaulted or raped. They never taught me how to handle just sex and male parts, female parts. I mean, I knew about female parts because I knew myself, but I didn't know anything about penises. Penises scared me. Everything about the male body just terrified me. And so I got into my first relationship and had sex for the first time at age 22. When that happened, I was dating someone who was not a Christian, which was unfortunately against my parents' wishes. Once they started figuring out that it wasn't just a crush and that it was moving into a serious state, my father became extremely overwhelmed and overprotective and didn't necessarily handle things right with our relationship.
Parker, thank you so much for telling us all of this and sharing so much. I want to go back to some of the things that you said because I'm just curious about that introduction to pornography. You said that you had a crush that went on for 6 years. Was that a crush or did that person become your boyfriend?
That was only a crush. He
Okay.
never, I'm pretty sure he knew that I had a crush on him because I did not know how to handle myself well, but it just was a fantasy. The closest contact we ever had was we were in a church group and we held hands for prayer.
Okay. So I'm just going to ask you just a couple of questions and then we can continue in the story. The pornography, you said you really delved into pornography, you delved into male female, delved into female female. Did you also find yourself, because you said whatever it took to have the orgasm, which for a lot of people means escalation, did you go into things that were dark and deviant? I know you said that you kind of stopped, I guess, maybe moralizing or judging what it was that you were looking at. Did that mean that you went to darker pornography?
I did delve into darker pornography, but I want to say a little bit later. I want to say maybe a year or two after I'd started watching full on pornography. I would read books that involved, and I don't know what this dark category is, but it involved, someone who was captured or possibly even, dare I say, raped or something along those lines where you're held against your will, but end up enjoying it. That type of porn, I didn't know how to find it, and I still would not be able to tell you what it's called, but that sort of darker side of
Like rape fantasy?
yes, exactly, and And
So you
that
found it first through smut? I'm assuming that that's what you're saying.
yes. Yeah.
Okay.
My version of smut, which of course was probably not as smutty as a lot of these books are now, but
Well, you know what? I just want to say one thing, which is very interesting. So parents maybe are kind of not addressing these issues, especially when you come from a more conservative household. And you said you were 12 years old and you literally watched something as simple as Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. I mean, I want to make that really clear to people.
I know.
Our sexual development comes on irregardless of whether parents irregardless or regardless of whether parents talk about it or not. And
Yes.
those feelings, like I masturbated as a child. I was a young child. I remember masturbating. I remember telling my mom overhearing me and saying, like, ooh, that's bad. And I was like 9 years old, 10 years,
Yeah. It's
something like
crazy.
that, like ridiculously young. I didn't know the word masturbation, but I knew what I was doing, like touching myself, and my mother scolding me. So these things happen without parents desire with like we don't know when it's going to happen. We need to address these things in kids. And I just think that's really interesting and parents should hear that. It was Joseph and the Technicolor Dreamcoat. Okay.
It's amazing. It's so wild. Even someone like myself who was exposed to zero bad words, sex in movies, violent, like completely sheltered, I still found something.
And then just out of curiosity, you went to pornography, you found pornography, you said that the scenes that you first saw were they disgusted you when you saw the pornography. And I'm just curious about that. Do you feel like that was, like, a little bit traumatic to see that stuff? Did it make you like you said, penises were very strange to you?
Yes,
I
yes.
imagine that when you get into that dark stuff, it would like, I don't know, I don't wanna tell you how did it make you have any sort of reaction to the idea of having sex and, it being with a penis?
Oh yeah. I was terrified. It to me, it was very repulsive and uh, it was almost like I wanted to say too graphic for me where I would click on that link and see it and go, "No, if that's what sex is really like, I don't wanna have it. I wanna have the" I mean, I remember telling my best friend, like, that we both agreed that penises and penetrative sex, once sex developed to that point, we wouldn't wanna do it. We liked the making out, we liked the touching, we liked the idea of possibly the male pleasing us, but when it came to us having to please a man or anything to do with penises, we would just laugh and joke and be like, "Nope, I'm gonna, that's just not gonna happen. It's gross." It was very repulsive for me for a long time.
I'm gonna let you go back to your story or let Dr. Chez ask a question. I just want to say I feel like from my conversations, you are so not alone in this. And I think that pornography is actually scaring a lot of young people from
Yeah.
and I mean girls particularly because of the abusive dark side of stuff. But I'm gonna let Dr. Chez jump in here.
Yeah, I liked that you asked Steph about the trauma part because that's the question, Parker. It sounds like you had the kind of preoccupative, that isn't a word, but the preoccupied thoughts about this stuff, like you were thinking about it, doing it every day, trying to seek it out every day. Did you have the things where you would have almost like flashbacks of the visions? Like, did you have, if you think of typical PTSD type symptoms, did you have those kind of things show up for you?
I feel like maybe a little bit. It was definitely something that was always on my mind regardless. Like I remember when I would watch Beauty and the Beast as a kid, and then as I started getting older and getting into more pornography, I started feeling like, "Oh, I would like to be Belle in that situation," because of the fact that she could potentially be captured by Beast, and there could maybe be, some sort of smutty tale that turns that situation darker and sexier, and I would mull on that. Or my favorite book series where the bad guy, I would turn to fan fiction where people had seemed to have the same mindset as I did, where we could see the bad guy in a very sexual light, and it felt good to see him, you know, possibly. I mean, it sounds so horrible to say out loud and let it escape my mind, but you know, reading about this new version of my favorite book where the bad guy is possibly raping the main character or
Mhm.
forcing her into some sort of sexual situation that was very alluring to me. And it was very weird it and was absolutely giving me flashbacks and constantly thinking about those scenes or those imaginary, fantasies that I had in my head.
Did it interrupt your ability to, like, do your homework or do other after school activities? Do you think it had an influence in those areas?
I would say because I was homeschooled, so we
Oh,
were
that's right.
involved in a lot of homeschool groups. I will say at one point, my crush with that one boy got so bad that I had to be pulled from church and a lot of classes with him because I was only going to church and only focusing on classes because he was there. I wasn't learning. I was failing a lot of my tests. I wasn't doing my Bible reading. I wasn't doing a lot of my church homework because I was going to church and going to school just so I could see that boy. And my mom caught wind of that and was like, "Yeah, this is not this is not healthy. You can't see him anymore."
Gotcha, gotcha.
Sounds a little bit like maybe the porn. I mean, I'm sure when it got dark, maybe that was a little like, did that disturb your brain? I'm imagining that like the initial porn maybe wasn't so disturbing to you, but probably the later usage of like when you went to the darker stuff, maybe was that problematic, do you think, in your brain?
Absolutely. I mean, half of my fantasies started in my head, and it was like, they are going to stay there. I remember just thinking that, which is why this is so healing to do this podcast, by the way, because I've never spoken most of this out loud before to anyone. So it feels really good. But
I
yeah,
just got chills.
Good for you.
no,
This is
it's
big.
awesome to be able to say that and feel like I'm not alone because that's the number one thing that I think growing up and just in later years too, I felt was that I was the only one having these dark thoughts and, people also had those dark thoughts, but they were confident enough to express that and live that life. I wasn't, and I was going to keep it all in my head. And so it does feel really good to be able to just share in the hopes that I can maybe help someone who has those same feelings or grew up with those same feelings.
What I'd like to ask about, because it sounds like what you're saying from what we just talked about, do you feel like your brain and your interests and everything was, so to speak, being programmed or reprogrammed or, whatever word you want to use, but do you feel like it was kind of hijacking things?
Yes, I feel like a lot of my daily life and thoughts revolved around sex and porn and just I think because I wasn't provided with a free place to talk about it, I would either talk to my friend who was also very sheltered and I didn't know what consent was at such an early age, and so I didn't know that you should ask your friends before talking about explicit things. You should make sure they're in the right space to speak about things. I didn't know that, and so it would either keep everything in my own head and let it just completely ramble my thoughts and just be the forefront of my mind, or possibly talk about it with my friend, which it was just a release at that point. So it definitely invaded a lot of my daily tasks and a lot of my just life in general because I was thinking about it so much.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Do you want to continue with your story? I think we were right at the point where you had your first boyfriend at 22, I want to say.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I was saying, I got my first boyfriend at 22. He was not a Christian and therefore my parents extremely disapproved. I remember the first time my parents met my boyfriend. It was my sister's birthday party. And my father did not acknowledge my boyfriend. My father didn't talk to him other than saying hello. And my father's a very kind and charismatic guy, so I knew immediately that something was up. But he essentially talked to my boyfriend privately at the start of the party and forbade him to have intercourse with me and then educated him on the outcomes and possible consequences of intercourse, much to my humiliation and shame, unfortunately. Luckily, and I am very thankful for this. My first boyfriend, unfortunately, he wasn't a great guy. He was very toxic and things didn't last very long. And it was I still find it very sad that I mean, he was my first time. But the good thing about him was he knew a lot about protection, and he was actually the first person to educate me on what condoms were, on what birth control was, and the pullout method, and all of these things. And he was very, very adamant that protection was used from both of us, both of our sides. And he was able to educate me on a lot of things that I had never known before. I think because my parents assumed that I wasn't going to have sex before marriage, they didn't feel the need to teach me about protection because they assumed that I would not be having premarital sex. So I learned a lot from that first boyfriend. My father also wrote me a letter, which is his way of expressing a lot of things to me. But he wrote me a letter basically forbidding me as well to have sex and also talking about the consequences of having sex and forbidding me to ever have an abortion. There was unfortunately no mention in the letter of, what would happen if I did get pregnant, if I would have their support. It was mainly just, it was a lot of guilt and a lot of shaming me for having sex. And it was not appreciated being someone who was just fresh out of college, who desperately trying to move out and start her own life, to have her own father be completely shaming and, you know, he meant it as love, but it didn't come across that way. I resented my father for a very long time after that. But luckily, we've been able to reconcile and I've been able to share with him a lot of my struggles with that letter and how he treated that relationship. And since then, he has been wonderful for my current relationship. I can still see pornography affecting my relationship now. It's crazy how it keeps resurfacing in life. It's something that I feel like, in a way, has been the bane of my existence. It's always been there. It's always been something I've struggled with. And it's been hard because I have a lot of friends who strongly believe, you know, porn is bad. That's all that I've been taught. And I've struggled a lot with the thoughts of, okay, well, if it is bad, then why am I constantly watching it? Why am I constantly feeling these good feelings? Why is it something that I always revert back to? And so on. And I feel like that's kind of the never ending questions that I've always had just moving forward in life and with my faith and with my relationships. It's it's always been a struggle for sure.
Can I ask you a question? Do you still struggle with it?
I wouldn't say that I would call it a struggle now. I would say I'm very comfortable with the fact that I still watch, uh, you know, some, not as, it's definitely not as much as when I was younger. It's more of an every once in a while situation for me now. And it, it's just something that I feel like was never stopped. I did go through about 2 years ago, which was really cool. I ended up realizing that I was very heavily addicted again. I had bookmarked, I think, over 200 different videos that I would divert back and forth between watching. And then one day I just decided that I was done and it didn't need to be that frequent. And I deleted all the videos, which felt really good at the time. And so now it's just become sort of a background thing that, if I'm bored or if I'm, looking to masturbate, that's what I'll use.
So you are proving one of the things that I say frequently, which is that today young people correlate masturbation with pornography. And the idea of masturbating without pornography is like they can't even fathom how that happens.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I actually want to add to that point too, which has been really interesting is I want to say within the last year or so, there have been a few times where I've thought to myself, I'm really, really horny right now. I really need to masturbate. And I've tried to not use porn. And as you said, it's really hard because my mind correlates masturbation with porn. And I was able to masturbate a few times without it and just using my own fantasy thoughts, whether it was about my boyfriend or whether it was about, a sexual experience in the past or a book that I read or something. And that it felt a lot different and it felt really good to be able to do that almost like a victory. If I say, like, it felt like, wow, I just did that all within my own mind. My mind is super powerful and awesome. And I just did that.
Well, I think this is actually a really important point for young people who are struggling with this because I don't know how many times you have pushed through in masturbating without pornography. There is a decline in the amount of arousal that you might feel. But then as you go on, it's like, I think they call it with men because, arousal can't really be, I don't know how to like manipulate it if you're a man,
Sure.
right? If you don't have
Yeah.
if you don't have an erection, you're out of luck, right? So they go through a flat line. Women go through a similar thing, but I think we have a little bit of a greater ability to maybe manipulate things a little bit more to
Yeah,
make it happen.
absolutely. Yeah.
So I think it's important to say that because I think if you push through on those things, your mind will become stronger. It's like any muscle. You know what I mean? Like we have
Absolutely.
to get beyond the porn. And that's why porn is such a easy draw back in because the arousal is so instantaneous.
Yeah. It's that
And
dopamine hit. It's just instant and you're good.
but I also think that for a long time we've been saying to men, like that men are more horny than women are. I don't actually think that's true.
I don't think that's true.
I think for a long time it was normal or more normal
Acceptable.
for men to look at porn and sexually explicit material where women weren't. But
Yeah.
as soon as anyone looks at sexually explicit material, you feel horny.
Yeah.
It's like a normal bodily response. So I have this debate with my husband many times. Like, how do you know? How do you know? We have a history of men looking at sexually explicit things and women not. And now you have a culture where it's acceptable for both, still more acceptable for men than women. And you see that women experience arousal at the same rates. I
Yeah.
don't think you can prove that. But I do think that pornography, again, that training of your brain is so, and I never tell people not to watch porn. I personally think it's not a great thing at all in any way. There's like not even one aspect I can say is I've seen it as a positive. But I
Well,
would
I
say
agree.
that is definitely something that people should hear. You
Yeah.
will get wired to that, and that will be the only way you're able to feel arousal without going through a flat line or a real low experience of orgasm. It will
Yes.
build over time, but it's something to know.
Yeah. No, that's good. I really like that.
Parker, when you said that you felt numb, you mentioned the word numb. What were you talking about with that?
So I guess what I mean by that is when I was younger and watching porn, it felt so, I was living in my parents' household. I was doing something that they disapproved of. I was very heavily involved in my faith. I didn't think that anyone else around me did it. So I felt very alone and it felt more to watch porn. It felt more like I'm doing a bad thing. I'm doing something naughty. I'm sinning. This is private. This is personal for me. As an adult now, where I'm living on my own, I'm in my own relationship, my faith has taken a different course than it was when I was younger. To me, by saying the word numb, I mean more of I don't have those screaming voices in my head saying, "This is bad, this is awful, you're shameful," guilt tripping, because I have a partner who, is my main involvement in my life, and my parents are second to that. And I'm on my own now. And so because I have a partner who is supportive of both of us and our own personal time and with, pornography watching and things like that, I say numb because it's not as loud in my head when I'm watching porn. It's something more of a normal, this is just this is okay now kind of a thing. And so it's not as loud in my head.
Got it. Okay. Okay. Do you wish that it wasn't something that you went back to? Do you wish it wasn't something that was involved in your sexuality, your sexual experiences?
Yeah, I think I do. to be honest, it's hard for me to remember a time when I wasn't watching porn. And so thinking about that question is kind of like unearthing a lot of different feelings that I've, just been so, I feel like I've been founded on for the last, 10 plus years.
Right.
I feel like now I definitely wish that I hadn't, simply because I see how it's affected my relationship. It's affected my self view extremely. I'm extremely sensitive and have struggled with confidence and initiating sex and just that feeling of not being able to perform well. And sex is so technical for me now. Whereas I'm thinking about, okay, I have to do this. I have to make this perfect sound like that porn star does. I have to have a flat stomach like this porn star does. Oh shit, I don't have a flat stomach. Well, I have to do this position where you can't see my stomach. Like, it's so technical and I overthink it so much. And I've had struggles in my relationship because of that, where my boyfriend is also very analytical and very technical. And so we both overthink it, where it's hard for us to just be in the moment and be with each other without having those thoughts of, at least from my side, I don't believe he has experiences these thoughts, but from my side of being like, am I doing it good enough? Am I performing well, like that porn star that I saw once, or the porn star that I see everyone raves about, or, do I look pretty enough? I don't want to do it without makeup on because, I feel ugly. Just the amount of overthinking that it has caused is the reason that I would not. I wish that I hadn't, experienced it. If I would have known when I was younger the effect it would have on on my daily adult life and my sex life, I would have told my younger self, "Don't go near that." And and it's unfortunate because now, like I said, it's been decades of this. I can't remember a time when I wasn't watching it, so it's very hard to think back on, what life was like without it, essentially.
Right. Have you looked into like Stephanie and I both believe it's an addiction. It obviously it's programmed that way, but have you looked into what it would take to be free of it? Like would that be something you'd be interested in? And I'm so sorry for all this because
No, no,
it's not
it's
your
okay.
fault. I just want to say that like it's so not your fault. It's so sad the way this stumbling happens and then it becomes out of control. Like it becomes almost impossible, for some
Yeah,
people without
it's
knowing
so
how to do
yeah.
that.
It's so like there's so much unlearning that I have to do, and I've been to therapy, and I had a wonderful therapist for about a year. And then we had to part ways for insurance reasons, and she had really helped me get sort of a grasp on regaining back my confidence and not thinking about, you know, what others look like or what others the impact that porn had on my brain, but it wasn't something that was specifically for sex and porn. It was just a general therapy as well. So I'll be honest, I haven't looked into it, but it is something that I would want to explore absolutely because I just don't know what it would look like to be free of that. It's something that I never really thought about, to be quite honest with you.
You said that you're okay. Your partner and you give each other your time and your space with the pornography that you like, blah, blah, blah. And I really actually question whether that's true. I'm not sure that that is okay because and I want you to tell me that I'm wrong, but if porn and the porn that your partner watch makes you insecure, you're literally feeding the same beast, right? Like the more
Yeah.
you watch porn, the more you have to go back to porn. And then because, first of all, you're saying that you're cool with it, right? So you
Yeah.
go to porn, and when you're watching porn and you're masturbating, you don't have to have a flat stomach. You don't have to wear makeup.
Yeah.
You don't have to do the right position. You get to just be embodied with yourself and enjoy the experience of sexual arousal and orgasm. So it drives it because that experience of partnered sex becomes so complicated, so heavy. There's so much expectation around it that you actually can never experience the same level of arousal and orgasm.
Yeah.
only through unlearning together, only having a partner who's willing to be on the same path, can you dismantle in your brain what sex looks like by a porn script, if you will.
Yeah.
So I question whether you're cool with that, like not because you're lying to yourself, but I just think it becomes easy. And the hard path through is what's actually going to make you happy in the long run. It's going to be hard in the short term, but in the long run, you're going to be able to be like, my stomach is hanging out. You know what? And actually, we're going to talk about I want to talk about your family, but I do think this goes back to when you don't learn things, you don't even learn how to advocate for yourself. You don't learn your own agency, what you want. So things are happening in sex. I'm imagining, because we're saying you're feeling uncomfortable in certain positions. Like, there is no amount of sex that should feel uncomfortable or bad to you.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not enjoying that position. You should be able to say to your partner, you know
Yeah.
what? My legs behind my head, that's just doesn't feel good. I don't like that. That's
Yeah.
when you fully get to be embodied and you fully get to live in your what brings you sexual pleasure.
Yeah. No, you're so right. And thank you for calling that out, because I did, I feel like, highlight something. What I meant more by my comment was that he's supportive and isn't, I don't know how to word this, but we're comfortable in our own, self masturbation times, and we're comfortable in sexuality as well. He's actually been extremely open and helpful to me, where I have been able, and he's the first he's actually the first person that has made me feel fully, completely, 100% comfortable with having sex. And in a lot of past relationships or situationships, I've had people that all I wanted to do was be the porn star, and all I wanted to do was be in the right position that felt good for them. And I disregarded a lot of, not even just a lot, I disregarded all of my wants and my needs, and tried to find the things that felt good in the moment. And my current partner is actually the first person that I was able to be open about that with, and hear his struggles with pornography addictions in the past as well, and his, sexual history. And it was very eye-opening to me to be able to learn positions that I actually did love, and to be able to actually orgasm with him versus anyone else. He was the first person that I was able to have a penetrative orgasm with, which was huge because of just learning different things. I guess what I meant, yeah, about my comment earlier more was, I had always been with partners who had kind of judged me for watching porn, or, like you had said, assumed that women didn't really do that, and then, was very shocked. This partner that I have now is very open to me, you know, having my time for myself, but also with him as well. But I love how you worded it, though, and that was really encouraging to hear too, because you're right. When you're by yourself, you don't give a shit what you look like. And that was just a cool reminder of, like, how do you channel that mentality and that mindset in sex with another person?
And that's what you deserve. That's what you should
Exactly.
have.
That's
You
that's bare
should not
minimum.
be if you are up in your brain, you're not in your body.
Mhm. Mhm. And I've
Pretty
had to
much.
learn that.
Um,
But
yeah, this is such good conversation, Parker. I absolutely love this. As a relationship and marital therapist, this kind of stuff is not talked about and isn't explored, of how do you relate together? How do you even reconcile, like, the way that somehow you have reconciled, I'm sinning, quote unquote. I'm a sinner, quote unquote, because I've done something that, my upbringing told me was wrong, but then you have these physical feelings, and how you reconcile all of that, and then reconcile it moving into where you are today. That's a big path that you've come to. So I do want to hear how you've done that. My thought about the therapist is the truth, that most therapists do not know how to help people overcome these kind of addictions. They just don't. I know that. It's not part of our training. There's a little bit of training of this in marital courses, but it's not part of it. So even if you did talk to your therapist about, okay, how do I overcome this? There is a bit of a specialization in this that you need to know how to do that.
Yeah.
And there are different ways, but I almost feel like we should start a support group for that because you're
Oh,
definitely
I love that.
not alone. I think that there would be a lot of people because it's so ubiquitous is the word that Stephanie and I have used a lot, but it's so vast, this problem. So what you're doing with your partner is the right thing. You do want to step back and you do want to openly communicate. This is a communication exercise before anything else. Be honest and openly communicate about your needs, desires, your experiences, what you don't want to do anymore, and the fact that you're now recognizing I don't wanna put myself second to the experience and to your pleasure, I'm
Yeah.
just as important. That's a big learning process. So, everything that you've been to is, I think, gonna be really helpful for our audience, but also confirming the steps that this takes. And it is, I believe from my experience, a thing where it may require full on, you know, I'm gonna choose to not do this anymore
Yeah.
to program my brain. That's the theory and action that seems to work the most. But that's something you may have to come to and choose on your own. But I was curious if you wanted to be free of that, if it felt like it still had enough of a hold that you did want to be free to it. And I want to recognize you and say I admire the steps that you are taking, what you're doing.
Yeah. No, I think that's the goal for sure is to be free of it. It's just
Mm.
hard to want to be free of something that you've known as so much as your daily habit or not daily, but just the weekly or it's just habit. And it's something I've known ever since I was young.
It's
And
habit and
Mhm.
your sexual development progressed through it your whole time from beginning to end, from
Yeah.
that, Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat moment till where you are today
Yeah.
has been shaped and consumed by porn. So yeah,
Conditioned,
it would be a big difference,
Yeah.
definitely.
literally conditioned the things that you're going to find arousing,
Yeah.
things what you're going to do.
Yeah.
I really want to talk about your parents, but I know that we have like to wrap up our conversation. So I just have two questions that I would like to finish with, and then I probably will talk to Dr. Chez about the things why it's important for parents to have conversations about sex, about porn, about all of these things in our wrap up. And I'm not necessarily sure that you can say anything you want to at the end of this, but before we get to that, I would like to ask you just two questions. One is, or not even two questions. I want to tell you one thing. You said it took me this long to have an orgasm through penetrative sex with my boyfriend. He was the first person you were able to. I want to point something out. This is again a myth of pornography. Only less than 20%, probably about 10% or less of women have orgasm from
Yeah.
penetration alone. Your clitoris has 600 nerve endings. The head of a penis has somewhere, especially if it's circumcised, has somewhere around 400 nerve endings. Your clitoris is where, and it's so to paint a picture, to expect that without clitoral stimulation, you're going to have an orgasm is like, you know, touching a man's leg and thinking that's going to give him an orgasm. The head
Yeah.
of the penis is stimulated from penetration. The clitoris is not necessarily stimulated from penetration. So that's why sometimes being on top gives the clitoris more sensation and where women are able to find that they can have orgasms that way. But it has for many people, even when they say, oh, yes, I can from, penetration alone, a lot of times it's because the position that they're in stimulates the clitoris. So I just don't want
Yeah.
to put out there that like people, because porn makes it look like jackhammer penetration is turning these women on, and that is just
It
a
oh
lie.
yeah.
It's a
You're
lie.
you're
It
preaching
doesn't
to
happen
the
that way.
choir. And when I learned that, I tell you the fireworks that went off in my mind. And when I think I saw a Reddit thread once, and I never thought, because when I was with previous partners, I used to fake orgasms when I was being penetrated because I was like, well, I guess women in porn can feel it, so then I should too. When I found out that, number one, don't ever fake it. Just don't, because you're
You're doing yourself a disservice.
you're doing yourself a disservice, and you're doing them, that man and
Your
his future
sister's a
partner.
disservice too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when I, like, realized that and then learned what positions felt good and that penetrative sex doesn't always, like you said, very rarely will actually make the woman orgasm, it was just eye-opening, and it felt so safe to hear that. Like, "Ooh, okay, I'm not alone." I thought it was crazy because I can't orgasm being jackhammered.
No. And the sad part is that
No one can.
men think that jackhammer is the way to bring a woman to orgasm. So
Yeah.
everybody's just being lied to. It's so crazy.
Crazy.
I wanted to say that. And then this was my actual question. I just wanted to tell you that, and for all the other girls out there, but and men, because you deserve to know that women are not getting off that way. I'm sorry.
No.
It's just you're gonna feel like you are less of a man, less, of a sexual like hero.
Yeah.
Your woman cannot have an orgasm from jackhammer penetration if she's being honest.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know that it has nothing to do with you. This is a porn lie.
Yes.
So my question is this: watching porn, knowing what your partner watched, did that make you do things sexually that you didn't feel comfortable doing because you knew that it would get them off?
In the past, yes. With my current relationship, no. In the past, I had looked at, like, an ex-boyfriend's phone and had found some of the, like, for example, I had a situationship who I would notice we would always have to have sex right in front of a mirror, and he would always have to watch himself. And I was like, okay, that's weird. And then once I learned out some of his kinks and fantasies, I would try to cater to that and do the best that I could. But it would always be uncomfortable and it would never be fun for me. But the thought of, well, it was also a people pleaser mentality too, of like, well, he really likes the sex with me. He's just going to keep coming back. I can keep him that way, which is just sad to think about now because clearly that's not, I was so desperate to finally get out of my shell and finally have sex and be a quote unquote normal person who had premarital sex that I was constantly trying to prove myself to partners and trying to keep them, if you will. And by doing that, it would be, okay, let me look at your phone. Let me see what porn you're watching. Okay, I'll do that position because you really like all the porn in that position, even if it didn't mean anything for me, you know?
Did any of those things actually ever scare you?
Yeah, one of my situationships, I ended up finding out after we ended it and he tried to come back. He was like, "Oh, yeah, I had a breeding kink." And I was like, "I'm sorry, what? Like, that wasn't something you wanted to disclose to me?"
A what
Um,
king?
A breeding kink. So he kept making jokes about wanting me to be pregnant. And
Oh,
it was just this kink of literally all he wanted to do was see me pregnant. And I was like, so does that mean was protection ever used when we were together? That just spiraled me into many, many thoughts. But yeah, some of the positions were absolutely not comfortable. I probably should have stopped on multiple occasions, or, you know, uh, there was one situation that I remember of he was so cute and I had really wanted to be with him sexually, and it finally happened, and it was probably the worst experience because it was extremely painful for me. Did I stop? No. Did I say anything? No, because in my mind was convincing me that no, this is what you wanted. This is okay. This is the boy we had a crush on. You're finally getting the physical situation that you wanted. And it clouded my brain of like, no, you should have said stop. If it hurts, it's uncomfortable.
I talk about the intimacy pyramid, but what you're really making me realize is when I was young, and probably Dr. Chez would say the same thing, when I saw a cute boy, I wanted to have, I wanted him to like me.
Yeah.
And I would have done, I probably, well, I don't know that I would have. I don't think it was on the table. All of the sexual stuff that's from porn wasn't on the table. So I didn't even put it into my mind. So him liking me meant something different than having sex with him.
Isn't that sad? Like, I mean, maybe it's just trippy talking about it and realizing it, like, now as I'm saying this out loud, but, like, because I never had a boyfriend, never had sex, never taught about it, it was so foreign to me outside of porn. Once I started having sex and once I broke up with that first relationship, it was like I was trying to find any boy to have sex with me because it validated me as a person. I associated my value and my worth with, did I have sex or not? And it's crazy to think about that now too, because I see it come up now. Even if I don't feel worthy, if my boyfriend doesn't want to have sex one night, or if he's like, no, I'm really tired, I immediately take it as, oh, that he doesn't like me, or I got to try better to get him to like me. You know, and it's like, it became such a self worth thing for me, something so taboo. Once I'm allowed to have it, all of a sudden, I was just any person I could sleep with to be like, okay, I slept with them. They like me now. Like, because I had sex with them, they like me now. And then, starting to experience the rejection after many sleeping with someone and like, that was fun, but I don't really want a relationship. Like, ow, that stabs the heart. Like, gotta find another person, it just went into this whirlwind.
Yes. This is the first time we've ever talked about this. That those initial steps, which it's beyond hookup culture. It's actually that like your generation is trained that attraction means sex beyond
Yep.
hookup culture. Because the only experience that you're having of this is so hypersexualized that there is the other stuff probably feels like, oh, that's my best friend in the schoolyard. That's
Yeah.
when we would look at that like somebody throwing us a note or, having initial conversations with us as, oh, we're building to that point where we're going to have a relationship. And in your mind, it's like, unless there's the sex, it doesn't count. It doesn't mean anything.
Well, and to piggyback on that, when I first met I've been with my current partner for 5 years. When I first met, and he's the longest relationship I've ever had. When I first met him, I immediately in my mind had this thought of like, okay, we're gonna probably have sex in like a week after meeting each other. I was so programmed that in order to please a man or make him like me, I should have sex. That when I met him, it was so refreshing because he was the one who made me wait
Mhm.
and was like a month, 2 months. I can't even remember how long, which doesn't sound that long, but for me, it was very long. And it was like, no, he was so focused on getting to know me as a person, who I was, what my personality was, my likes, dislikes, this and that. I'd never had that. And so it was really hard for me to not want to try to initiate a sexy talk or try to have sex because in my mind, that was how I was gonna make him like me. Whereas, I mean, that still proves to this day, we don't really have sex that often, and that can be hard for me. But at the same time, knowing that that's not the forefront of his liking me, he's my life partner for a reason, and it's that because he loves me for who I am. I could not have sex with him for years and he'd be fine?
Yeah. He values you.
What I wrote down on my paper was, I like this boyfriend. I like him for so many reasons that you've said. Really, I think he is the
Yeah.
person to do this experiment with if you're open to it or if he's
Yeah.
open to it. But I really I admire the things that he's done in spite of the fact that he has some of the same, kind of maybe less than healthy ideas about pornography because, it would be amazing to see what this could become.
Parker, I agree. It sounds like this is a really healthy relationship that, amen, somehow you found a person that you can be really open with, that you can grow with, that you can, be yourself with, which is not always the case for young people today.
Yeah.
So I'm really glad to hear that too. I think that if we can talk more and do a part two, that would be a beautiful thing to follow up with more questions that we both have. You have been really honest with your journey, and it's a different journey because you've got so much of the upbringing that has also conditioned you. So you've got conditioning, deconditioning, you've got a lot in there that I want to make sure we give due time to some of those deeper aspects of that formal conditioning initially as a little kid, and then you're kind of conditioning yourself or porn doing it. So let's do a part two. If you're game, I think that would be a great thing to
Absolutely.
do.
I love everything that we touched on today, and it felt just so good to be able to share my story for the first time, and I'm just so grateful to the both of you for creating such an open and safe space where it can go anywhere, and it clearly went where it needed to be, and I hope that people who hear this can be inspired, at least feel included and not feel like you're alone.
Yes, and I'm so glad that by the age of 29, and I'm sad that by the age of 29, this is the first time that you felt that way because we all need spaces to talk about these things. And what I know for sure is all of these things I have heard so many times. So there are going to be a lot of people who find healing from this. So I'm very grateful for your honesty and your openness. So thank you very much, Parker.
Yes, no, it's my pleasure.
And I look forward to our next conversation.
Me too.
Thank you, Parker. This interview was so powerful. I know that Stephanie and I are walking away like, oh, just a lot. Thank you so much, Parker, for your candid conversation and honesty and awareness again with your feelings. Like, I feel like this guest in particular is so aware, and maybe because she's 29 and she's reflected, but I was struck by, and I know Stephanie will echo this, her list of what porn taught her. And I want to just say that again for parents and listeners because it to me really stayed with me like, wow, this is what it's teaching us. She said, porn told me I was overweight. It told me I didn't look like the people on the screen. It told me I wasn't worthy. That hit me. That hit me hard. It told me I needed to have sex like the girls on the screen. It told me I need to be good at sex. It told me I need to perform well to please my partner. That's on me. It's my job. So all of those things contributed to her low self-esteem, low self-confidence. You know, she went through the upbringing about feeling like a sinner. And that was a second thing that struck me was she said to her mom, I feel like I'm addicted to porn, but then got into, am I a sinner because I'm watching this? And her mom focused on the sinner part instead of the addiction part. Her mom said, you're not a sinner if you're not masturbating while watching porn. You know, she kind of was caught off guard, as she said. So I'm not blaming mom in any way. But the part that was a key opportunity was for this young child to say, I think I'm addicted to porn. That's a big revelation and statement. And unfortunately, there wasn't an opportunity, or mom didn't have the wherewithal to say, okay, let's address that. Let's do something about that. You're right. If you think you're addicted to something, you are. Like if it starts to dawn on you, shoot, I might have a problem. You do. Like that's a yes. So that struck me too. So I guess what I want to say in response to that is if we hear our kids say, hey, I think I have a problem with XYZ, I hope that we all see that as an opportunity to really take that seriously. And if we don't know what to do, we find somebody that can help us and we get them help. So those are the two things that I was most struck with.
Thank you for sharing those. And I agree with you on most of them. But as a sex educator, what jumped out at me was how her parents talked to her about nothing that related to sex. And I think that it bears repeating. She said that they didn't talk to her about sexual assault, any of these kind of things. And I want to say whether you believe your child should or should not be sexually active is irrelevant because I had to look up these statistics and I want to give them to parents because I think it's really important that they understand these things. 40+% of young people have had sex by the time they graduate high school. 97% of young adults have sex by the time they leave college. And actually, they have sex earlier in that 4-year period if they don't go to college. So parents have literally a kid living in their home and the opportunity to have these really important questions answered or discuss these really important topics. And I think, even further, I want to tell parents some of these statistics that are shocking. So that's people who willingly have sex. But in a study of 22,000 women out of the UK, and anecdotally, Dr. Chez and I hear the same thing. 82% were sexually harassed by someone, and 62% were harassed at least 3 times before the age of 18. Before the age of 18, 51% were kissed without consent. Before the age of 18, 80% were sexually touched, and 44% experienced this at least 3 times. 30%, again, before the age of 18, were forced to engage in a sex act by someone before the age of 13. Sorry, that was before the age of 13. 25% were forced to or coerced to give or receive oral sex. 33% were forced into penetrative sex without consent. 14% are forced to watch porn with an adult. 20% were given drugs or alcohol before being forced into sexual activity. Deciding to be sexually active is one thing. Having it forced on you or being coerced out of you is absolutely something else. We have the opportunity to have all kinds of conversations, which if you read Dr. Chez Dr. Chez is in my forthcoming book, you will learn how to have these conversations, but they are so important because most parents are just trying to stop their kid from having consensual sex before the age of 18. There's a whole lot of activity that is non-consensual. In fact, 50% of young people were sent sexually offensive or violent sexual messages online before the age of 18. 36%, and this is way lower than the numbers that we hear, because I think it's almost 100% of young people were sent unsolicited nude images. 10% have had their private sexual images that they sent to someone, regardless of what parents tell them, they've had them shared non-consensually in a group of people. So these are conversations we should be having with our kids. And I'm sorry to be on a soapbox, but I want parents to hear this. For young people who have sex young, more than 50% regret that choice to have sex below the age of 18. In a study out of the UK, again, between 16 to 18-year-olds, so we're talking sophomores, juniors, and seniors in high school, they show more young people engaging in anal sex than historically our numbers show, and because of its popularity in pornography. And what female subjects report is that their partners were not concerned about the pain that they experienced. They said that it was risky, and most of them reported that it was coercive. Where are these conversations that need to happen with parents? So if your child, like Parker, is watching pornography, they're getting their ideas from there, even when you're not having the conversations. And then they're engaging in a society where all of these things happen coercively, whether, non-coercive engagement happens, there can be coercive acts within a consensual sexual activity, because most young people that I encounter, they think that, okay, I'm saying yes to sex. And when they say yes, that means yes to all, whatever their partner decides. And if their partner decides to open hand slap them in the middle of that sexual activity because that's what they saw in porn, that's what's going to happen. So when we don't engage with our children, which to me is such a loss, you have them under your roof until they're 18. We don't have the opportunity to tell them what healthy sex looks like. As Parker said, without these conversations, they can experience sexual violence. They've been coerced into sexual activity. They may question their sexuality, like we'll hear from Parker in the next episode, but, they'll question their sexuality because female to female porn is more appealing than male female porn. They may think that porn sex is what is normal without you having conversations. What does healthy, what does beautiful, what does non-coercive sexual activity look like? And again, like Parker said, her worth was being tied up in how she performed sex. So I just want to encourage people, sexual awakening is happening. Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat, or something smutty that they read, or because someone airdrops them a porn video. Kids are exposed, and we have an obligation as parents, regardless of how awkward it feels, to have these conversations so that we can talk about all the different varieties and ways that sexual activity, consensual and non-consensual, happens to our children that we love more than anything. You need to love them more than you feel awkward. You need to understand the reality that is out there and then say, I don't care how awkward it feels. I just think it's really important because, like Dr. Chez said, so many sad messages that Parker got about herself, but so much risk is out there when we don't take this opportunity of children living under our roof. Again, our book will cover, how do I do this in a healthy, great way? How do I do it in an easy way? It's going to feel awkward at first, but you will get there. Trust us.
And what Parker alerted us to, and this is something that I want parents to hear, is as commonplace, unfortunately, as it could ever be. Parker said, I think I'm addicted to porn. She had a sister who was struggling with wanting to run away, another sister who wanted to die. That is what is happening with the youth today. And whether it's because of porn or the myriad of all kinds of social, cultural pressures and struggles, that is what is happening in families today. So we really do need to unite and find ways as parents that we can address all these things because they are struggling. And that's where her mom was at a loss. Like, I don't blame her at all. She was at a complete loss. She's got 3 girls struggling in very heavy ways. And all she could think about was the sinning part because she didn't have any frame of reference. So I think that the educators of the world, what we're doing and others, need to unite to help parents with what do we do with all these problems that our kids are facing. So yes, it's big. Thank you for Parker for opening up this can of worms.
Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for part 2, digging in with Parker a little bit more about this and some different topics that we will touch on. So we'll see you next Sunday at 7 a.m.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of 7 on Sundays.
The 7 on Sundays podcast represents the opinions of Dr. Chez Leeby and Stephanie Boye based on our experience. It also shares the stories, behaviors, and opinions of our guests that we do not necessarily condone or view as healthy. 7 on Sundays is an open forum to discuss what is happening with our listening audience. Some names and details of our guest stories have been changed to protect their anonymity. This podcast is not a substitute for mental health treatment. If you are in crisis and in need of mental health support, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It is free and confidential.
Join the conversation and connect with us through our website, 7onsundays.com. That's the number 7 on Sundays.com. We encourage everyone to do their own research. Thank you and be well.